Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session on starting and maintaining a library of things. I am happy to introduce Hazel Onstrand. I am so sorry. I should have asked how to pronounce your last name before we began. Hazel is a public librarian at the Curtis Memorial Library and who works on community programming and collection development, including an extensive library of things focused on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And you may have seen uh, Hazel and the Curtis Memorial Library's Library of Things featured in the New York Times. Um, so, Hazel, I am going to pass it on to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, for having me here, and for everyone who's come. I love talking about this topic. So, mostly because I get to learn from y'all. And so I'm Googling at night as I go to bed, being like, ooh, what's another library of things around the world? How do I say that in a different language? Ooh, I found another one. Yay. So, I realize not all of you are that geeky. Maybe you're also like me and reading romance novels instead or something. That's wonderful too. But the point is I'm really grateful to be able to share what I've learned and then learn from you in return. And that is probably the most important thing I'm going to say today is that this hopefully is just the start of your library of thing learning journey if you decide to go down that road. And I am not the only resource. So we're going to talk a lot about other people and other options for you to join today. So don't hesitate to put your questions in chat. I'm going to try to keep my eye on that as I go through this. And there's no question that's silly. I can talk about lice. I can talk about all sorts of things. We can talk about, if things get stolen, whatever those primary concerns are that you have or that your other people on your staff have, happy to go there. Okay? And if you're too shy to ask now, I also get it. I fake extroversion very well for a short amount of time. So you can talk to me afterwards. You can ask in the Lot Mutual Aid group, and I'll give you those resources. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, question for you. I'm sharing my screen now. If I keep chat up, can you see the chat on my screen?
No, we just see your
Yes.
screen.
Perfect. Okay, that's how it should be, but I went to a presentation a couple weeks ago and we could not get the chat to go away for everyone. So then I put it away. Okay, hooray. So this is the presentation we have today. Um, I really want to talk about, what you want for your library of things. And maybe the answer is you don't want a library of things. That's fine too, okay? But whether you're new to this concept of the library of things or whether you're not new and you have an extensive library of things and are just looking for some other ideas, I'm here for you. And there's all sorts of good reasons to choose many paths. Diversity in library of things, just like libraries, is going to be our strength. So there's no wrong answer, just like there's no right answer here. But there are wonderfully a lot of answers and a lot of decades worth of experience. And I have been really fortunate as a human and a public librarian to talk with all sorts of different libraries and librarians around the world about their library of things. So today I'm going to try to share some of the knowledge I've gained. However, you're going to make that knowledge even better because if you decide to wade into this world, which I'm pretty sure all of you do, you probably lend something that isn't a book. You probably lend a study space, or maybe you have that one electricity meter that you lend. You have a library of things, whether you brand it that way or not. You also lend kindness on a regular basis, so hopefully you're getting that back too. Okay, so here we go. Oh, my email is right here. So again, my name's Hazel. I'm from Curtis Memorial Library, which is this public library in Maine. We're actually a fairly small library nationally. We serve about 25,000 people, but we see about 1,000 people a day. So we are a really well utilized community space. Um, and so that definitely colors the way we operate. And just like your library, depending upon where you operate, you can do things differently too. In Maine, we're quite a large library. Okay, so again, we've already heard that we're going to be recording today. So if you forget something, you can go back to this recording, but you will also get a lot of other resources on how to get your questions answered. And I'm already seeing some excellent questions coming up in chat. So this is what we're going to go over today, and I'm going to do my best to answer these questions. But again, as I go along, don't hesitate to ask something. I also will leave room at the end for specific questions as well, so we can get into some of these like, okay, I have a real concern about carpet cleaners. Then we can talk about carpet cleaners. Okay. We don't lend them, by the way, but lots of my friends do. So we're going to talk a little bit about the key things I want you to take away from today if you're interested at all in this. We're going to talk a little bit about why you might want to curate a library of things. We're going to talk a bit about library of things models. It's not like there's just one model. There are so many to choose from. Again, we're also going to talk a little bit about how to cultivate a library of things. So then we'll get into a little bit of the nitty gritty, talking about cataloging. I hear you guys use Koha. We use Aspen Lida, and a lot of my friends use Koha Go open source. So that's wonderful that you can use. You can use that for your library of things, or you can choose an alternative software, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Or you can use a book. You don't have to even use software if you don't want to. And then again, we're going to go back and talk a little bit about some other resources. Again, I am planning on leaving a good amount of time for questions at the end, as well as answering them on the way through. Okay, so this is what I want you to remember. I have a QR code that goes to both of these on another slide. But these are two amazing resources that you have helped create. So people just like you around the world. So the first is the Library of Things Mutual Aid Group. So this is a group. It's really as simple as a Google group, which is a shared email. And what you can do is you join the group and then you can ask questions to that email list. And so when you ask a question, it goes out to everyone on the list, which is about, it's under 1,000 people, but it's still quite a few humans around the world. And you get a ton of varied answers. So for every person who says, I love this, you'll also be like, oh no, we don't go there. We don't do that. And this is why. So you can get really great examples of liability waivers. You can be like, I'm looking for Library of Things marketing materials. Can you guys send me some examples? You'll get a bundle of examples. And even then, you can look back at the archive and see answers that have already been asked. So it's a really great tool. And the more people we have asking questions and answering questions, the better tool it's going to be. The reason we chose to create this in this form was because if you get into tools, there is a really lovely international tool library listserv that's also a Google group that has been around for over a decade. So before I was a public librarian, I was actually volunteered to and co-founded the Portland, Maine Tool Library way back over a decade ago, and which is outside the public library system. So we didn't have some of those um, resources back then. So I can't tell you the difference it would have made if I didn't have to figure all that out, you know, uh, back then. So now there's just so many more resources, thanks to good humans all over the world. So that brings me to another resource, which is Shareable. It's a www.shareable.net. And this is a really great resource. They have a toolkit on library, what they call Library of Things, but it's about tool libraries that are not in the public library system. That is who they had help them make the toolkit. Full disclosure, I am the one public librarian on that toolkit, I believe. But that's a very different, you folks are not worried about starting a nonprofit or finding fiscal sponsors and things like that, likely. So they spend a lot of time on some of those basic things of working outside the public library system. However, it's a really great resource, one, for you to go to, but more importantly, for you to point your patrons to. So then they say, well, why don't you have this? Why don't you have that? Why can't you do this? And they're like, oh, we want to support the sharing economy, but we can't do it all. And this is a really great resource for you to point them, be like, yes, why don't you start a toy library in your synagogue basement? Yes, why don't in that church you start a community kitchen? and then a kitchen library. Yes, why don't you start that in your local synagogue? And then what we can do is we can share passes to it, and then we can all be part of the sharing economy together. Because as you well know, you are doing a ton as public librarians. Thank you for your public service. But that does not mean that you need to do every possible library of things that exists there. You need to pick the right fit that works for your goals as a public library and your community and what your local needs are. So these are the two resources that, and I have a QR code to them at the end of the presentation. You'll see this slide, but slightly prettier, hopefully. But these are the two resources. If you forget anything else I said, know that these resources are there and they're only going to get better. We have a lot of other collaboration that's going on these lists. That, for example, we're now sharing videos on the Library of Things mutual aid group. With Shareable, we're going to be working on more resources to help us save each other time and get a better bang for our buck. And if you want to be involved, we want you involved. This is the only way we're going to get better is if some humans like us who care work together. Okay, so open invite. So let's talk about why you may want to curate a library of things. You'll notice I put in LOT here a lot. That is just because I'm not that good a speller and I like shortcuts. So I started calling library of things LOT or a lot. So if I use the word lot, that's what a lot of us use. Some people don't capitalize the O, they just use L, small o, uppercase T, but that's a general thing. You'll notice in different parts of the world, they use library of things. It's actually a rental company. It's a rental service. Like a lot in the UK are rental services, but here, primarily in North America, when we're talking about a library of things, we're talking about a place where you can go get items, borrow them, and then return them, just like you can books. So you folks know that the modern public library can sometimes be this actually emergency room for societal issues, rather than just a book repository, right? We are a modern community center. And so as things change in our society, it may be that having a library of things can really help you meet your goals as a library. I know our building manager uses our library of things all the time to help with her tasks. And for us, we ended up using a library of things because we needed to get items to do programming to meet community needs. And so then we wanted to help our patrons meet those community needs. So we lent those items. And I'll talk a lot about some of those examples later on. But it's not to say that every library needs to have a library of things. However, you might want to consider it as another way to help you meet your needs. So then the next question we get a lot is, how do we know what our needs are? Well, I know you guys, a lot of you know what your needs are already. In fact, there's probably too many to count and they're overwhelming, right? And maybe you have an annual goal or a 5-year plan or your mission where you're like, okay, these are going to be our priorities and this is why. Because this other organization is meeting this goals, or these goals have come to the forefront. So we really need to focus on this, this, and this. And that's going to change with every library. It's certainly changed at my library over the 10 years I've worked here. But one of the things that we do a lot at our library when we run a program, for example, I'm not a programming librarian, I'm on desk, I do all sorts of things. We're multifaceted. I unplug toilets if necessary, right? We're not we do what we can. But I do run programs as part of being a librarian. And so one of my jobs is whenever I run a program, I'm actually running that program to help my community meet a community need. Sometimes it's to engage with a certain issue like lack of housing. Other times it's to escape and really appreciate and recognize that coming to the public library, we need more solar punk books and sci-fi books and fantasy books so to make sure that folks can imagine a different version of reality that they could then decide they want to build because they can take a break from any of their troubles and they can breathe deep and be relaxed for a moment and then they can go back to dealing with the rest of the things. And so I like to think of us as public libraries. We have to help people engage and we have to help people escape and we have to do both of those things well. And so part of meeting your needs as your public library, these are some of the inspirations that we've looked to here. So like, for example, a bare minimum of the goals we would like to achieve in our society are the sustainable development goals. That's like real basic, right? Like, be great if kids weren't hungry. Be great if we didn't have poverty. Be great if there's a whole bunch of things. I hope I'm wrong and that all of your communities have met the Sustainable Development Goals, but that certainly hasn't happened in my community. We also have some other great uh, regional frameworks. I really like Goodwill Northern New England's framework. And again, these I'll make sure you have these links. You can actually click on it and it will go to these. But I'll be sure to put them in chat, or we'll put them in the description of the YouTube recording. Um, the metrics and Goodwill's Northern New England's framework are really great because they focus on what you need to the aspects of your health, whether it's financial stability, mental stability, um, all sorts of things that you need to be a functioning human being and a part of our society. And so sometimes, those have different goals than those sustainable development goals. Also, sometimes like your state, I know New York State has some different health metrics that they're trying to meet. In my state, we're one of the oldest in the nation. I know you guys have a large aging population as well. So those needs are kind of different than some of the needs that some of your younger generation face. So again, your library of things does not have to be tied to your needs, but I highly encourage you to think about it before just going to buy things willy-nilly. I think sometimes folks get really excited about this concept and then they're like, "Oh, we're going to do a little bit of everything." And with no particular plan. And that's where it can get really overwhelming really fast because then the question is, what do you say no to and what do you say yes to and why? And if you bring it back to your needs and your goal for the collection, just like how you have goals with your book collection and collection development policies, if you have those same things for your library of things policy, it's going to make your life a lot easier so that when someone comes in and offers you 100 doll heads, you can be like, are 100 doll heads the right thing we want to lend for our library of things? Versus when they come in and offer you 5 guitars, you can be like, is that the right thing we want to lend to her? Yes, those both have happened to me. 5 guitars is just this morning. Someone drops them off. And to be clear, we're not keeping guitars. We don't have space for 5 guitars. But what are going to do is let I stack them up on my cubicle, on the side of my cubicle. Oh, my videos are automatically playing. That's new. Um, and I give them to people, to other libraries around the state. Okay, hold on. So, in the famous words of LeVar Burton, who was the old Reading Rainbow host, you don't have to take my word for it when you're thinking about whether or not you might want a library of things. I can tell you that it has all these benefits, but that doesn't mean that every member of your staff is going to see the same benefits. And it doesn't mean that your community will see the same benefits. For us, it's worked out really well. And because of that, over the past decade, remember, we've been doing this for a decade, we've grown it significantly. So today, we easily have over 2,000 items in the adult section and more in the teen section and more in the children's section. We didn't start like that. We started in the closet I'm in right now, in the network closet, which I don't know if you can see me, but there's oodles of wires behind me. And we started with 2 baker's racks. And that's how we started. Um, but we've grown because we listen to community feedback, we listen to community needs, and we have taken donations and done this. So what I've done here is I have put in some voices that are not mine. I might be the one talking to you today, but this is a huge team effort. And while I'm absolutely the one to blame at my library, if something is wrong with the library of things, that is me. If there's something wrong with the library of things, you come talk to me. I am the one to blame. And that's been really helpful for us to triage and problem solve as we've grown this in different ways. The success of this initiative is everyone here, including people who've come and moved on. I cannot tell you the importance of having everyone on your team. Were all of them for it at the beginning? No, no, of course not. Um, but we really try to take everyone's ideas. We started small and we tried to take everyone's concerns into consideration. And it's amazing when you listen and let humans have a voice in the decision-making process. that, oh, folks who may not have been for it for themselves for whatever reason get really excited about it when their granddaughter comes by, or when they see the joy it brings their community, or when they see how actually it's really no much more work and it makes people happy, so it makes their lives easier. And so being really responsible to those needs has been a key point of our success. For example, the ice cream maker ball, we don't lend that anymore. It was gross, came back gross, never came back clean. We could not get it clean. It started leaking. Ice cream ball sounds like a great idea, but now we have a really fancy ice cream maker that someone donated and people love it. We also have a less fancy one that people love. So for every solution, there really is a problem. So I'm going to play a couple of these videos. And but what I'm going to do is also we're going to have a blog post later this summer on our in the next month or so on our library website. And you'll actually be able to see every staff member who was willing to get videoed talk about their views on the library of things. And Cheryl's on the next page, but she's one of my friends. She's like, "Well, I don't use it, but this is why it's good." And this is what you need to be careful about. And so this hopefully will be a tool for you to use with your staff to say, hey, let's look at some different perspectives. And also, these are all humans who they're happy to talk and share their expertise, which is over a decade in some cases of knowledge about this. And of course, you don't just have to take my word for it. I've already given you those other resources. So let's hear from just a couple of humans on this. So we'll talk to Jen here today. She is at Circulation. She is a library aide, and she talks with oodles of people every day about the Library of Things. Oh, okay, we'll do this side instead. Let's see who goes. Someone's automatically going to talk. Maybe.
Hazel, I don't know about everyone else. I can see someone talking, but I can't hear him.
Oh no. Okay, well then we'll just skip this. They all have great things to say, and they all use Library of Things in different ways. Thank you so much for letting me know. This is actually the first time I've tried videos ever. It's on Canva. So we're just going to skip this. But my point is that all of these people have really different roles. So John is a librarian. He actually runs our repair cafes. I can't tell you before you even ever think about having a library of things, I encourage you to think about having a repair cafe because then it won't just be you repairing your items. It will be the repair volunteers with part of that repair cafe. So we did it the opposite way. We started the Library of Things first, and I was the primary repairer, but then my colleague John joined the team, and I'd run repair cafes before, but I didn't have the bandwidth. So he was able to cultivate a really amazing repair cafe environment where he now works less and does more. In the sense that he doesn't work every Saturday during a repair cafe. But now in our region, we have different libraries taking turns repairing. And so our patrons get access to more repair, we get access to more repair, and we work less at it. And that's beneficial for when you need to fix your wood chipper and you're like, oh, I think this is fixable, but I don't quite know how to do it. And then your repair volunteers spend the time and effort and do that for you. In our case, I it was wood chipping season, so I actually just bought a new wood chipper because wood chipping is a big deal around here for permaculture and no-till gardening, which is a focus of ours in our collection and our programming, focus on growing literacy. But they were able to fix our old wood chipper. So what we were able to do is then donate that wood chipper to another library. To be clear, we don't use any gas tools. This is just an electric wood chipper, and it's very portable. You can put it in most cars. Okay, so we're going to go on to Library of Things models. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the lessons learned from those humans. I'm going to send you that link to all of them on the website so that you can watch them all if you so choose. But know that each of us uses the Library of Things in a different way. Our developing marketing coordinator, she uses it to host parties at our library. and to have members of the board have something to talk about with the public. Our circulation aides have helped people set up their own. We've run so many birthday parties with our Library of Things items. We've made cotton candy out of locally grown maple syrup that then, that became the trendy thing to pick out for the season at the library. So we made like the local gossip columns at the local coffee shops with people, bragging about their maple syrup cotton candy that they, had for their grandfather's birthday. So there's so many ways in which our Library of Things has impacted our community in ways we never, ever expected. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts. Um, so there's a lot of different Library of Things models out there, and we're going to go through a bunch of them. But before we even do that, I want to take a moment to have you think about the what our sharing ecosystem could provide. The library does not have to do it all. Up in Western Maine, some public libraries didn't have space in their library for a Library of Things. Like not even a shelf. They didn't want to take up a shelf. But what they really wanted was outdoor gear. So they actually bought a trailer, and now every month the trailer goes to a different. Every week the trailer goes to a different library. So four libraries share the trailer, and all of them get access to outdoor gear in the Western Mountains. But that could just as easily be done, outside of the public library. And then what we do here at our library is we actually lend passes to people who share things. So, for example, we don't lend canoes, but we lend a pass to a local gear share place that started based with conversations with us. And they started it outside of the library system for very good reasons. They started it to serve local groups who take kids on camping trips and things like that. And they talked to us and we were like, okay, well, you need laundry facilities and you also need ways to sanitize helmets and you need these things. And they said, yes, we need all those things. So they designed it, they made it happen, and now we lend a pass to them. So our patrons get access to all of that and we don't have to store it. So when you're thinking about what you want and why, remember, it doesn't have to be on your bookshelf. Indeed, I bet some of you already have library passes you lend. Maybe they're to museums. That in some people's books counts as a library of things. Maybe you have a seed library. You're seeing some of ours here. That again could be considered a library of things. So it's not that you haven't already maybe done this already. You've already put your foot in, likely. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a few different models here in depth because I think it's really important to think about as you then get into the nitty-gritties of how do we make this work? What type of packaging should we use? So you can lend Library of Things items just like books. So you can treat them almost just like a book. But maybe you have Library of Things items in the kids section, in the teen section, and maybe you have a small amount of Library of Things items that are just for 18 and older. Maybe all of your items are for 18 and older. And those items you could reserve just like a book and pick up just like a book, but you couldn't necessarily get them for the exact date and time. Other people have libraries of things that are more temporal, that are based on a different temporal lending model. So in this case, you would reserve it for a specific date and time, much like a museum pass. And there's software for that as well. Although you don't need fancy software for any of this. You can literally use a book or an Excel spreadsheet. Um, there's different libraries who lend items that have consumables in them. So our teen library, for example, has all the fancy markers, but that is the only consumables we lend. And then you can also choose to have a library of things that only does one thing. So my colleague in Brazoria, Texas, for example, Lisa, she focused her initial library of things just on disaster response because they get hit with a lot of disasters on the Gulf Coast and in the Gulf of Mexico. And so she really focused her library of things on that, but then it grew. Our library of things, we actually started with crafts and a lot of food security programs. But no matter what model you choose, all of the questions have been answered. And not only have they been answered, we have decades of experience on how not getting sued, on how keeping your patrons safe, on how keeping your items clean, about how not having anyone steal the items. The good news is these answers are out there. So again, you can't do it all, but together we can all do something. So here you see a picture of the Lot Mutual Aid website I was talking about, the shareable website I was talking about, and I also put another one on here, which is the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. That is where we share a lot of the programs we run with our Library of Things, in addition to all of that. So, one of a lot of our libraries, a lot of folks who are doing Library of Things now are very focused on sustainability. And so if you are interested in that as well, I highly encourage you to check out the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, where remember, sustainability means both, it means socially equitable, it means economically feasible and environmentally sound. Okay, so let's talk about thematic Library of Things for a section. So, um, this is really where we started. So we started theme by theme. So for example, at first I didn't just take any donation. In fact, we didn't really ask for donations. But I certainly have helped libraries now where okay, we're only going to have a library of things focused on outdoor games. And so then they would take only donations on outdoor games. So that's a really great way to get started. Because then people start to think of you, oh, I bet the public library has that. I bet the public library has that. Other people have just focused on like tool libraries. So they only wanted to have certain tools. Other folks just kitchen equipment. And again, you can think about what makes sense for your needs. For us here, it's fairly regular that we lose electricity for a few weeks at a time in the winter. So for us, some of these key tools were really helpful for that. Same with flooding's fairly common when that happens. Trees falling down due to climate change. So what you're seeing right here is more of a disaster response-based library of things. But we actually have a number of thematic things. Here's another one that I bet a lot of you guys have already. So I bet some of you run programs like Meet the Candidate Nights. Well, all the things you would need to run those programs, you could also just lend as part of your library of things. And that is how a lot of ours got started as well, because we had a microphone and then we had to get a better microphone. So we're like, what do we do with this old microphone? I was like, oh, lend it, you know? And that let us really share the wealth of resources we had with a wide variety of humans. Now, some people lend kits with consumables. You'll see a lot of that suggestions on the Library of Things Mutual Aid group. Here at my library, we don't. At Curtis Memorial Library, we don't. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but we really focus on lending the tools, not the consumables. That being said, we're like, there's a lot of paint in the world. There's a lot of crayons in the world. There's a lot of stuff in the world. So we started something because we don't lend consumables in most of our Library of Things items. We started swap carts. So every week we have a food swap and giveaway, we have an art supply swap and giveaway, and we have a hardware swap supply and giveaway. Now we can never close the library on Tuesdays because they're lining up waiting for some of these, both to drop off amazing stuff and to take amazing stuff. And it has really been a wonderful way to reduce waste. We also have a lot of guide rails in place to say, okay, do not bring us your old paints that should be recycled. Those need to go to the recycling area. We have handouts on this. And we say, this is what we don't lend and why. Usually because it has to have consumables, or two, because you can rent it locally and we don't want to compete with those local businesses. Our one wood chipper that you can borrow is not competing with the Home Depot rental space or the Kennebec rental company. They know about us. They have our bookmarks about the Library of Things. If anything, we're providing them with more business. And it's the same with any local business we work with. I've never had a local business not want to give out our bookmarks about our Library of Things. In fact, they usually come in wanting to give more donations because they know what? Once you have the right tool to do a project, you can really improve. You'll actually do more projects, not less. Oops, wrong way. Checking time because I could talk about this with y'all all day. So I already talked a little bit pass-based and how we have the main gear share pass. This is something that I think is really underutilized. And I have a wonderful story that we just started a Chocolate Church Art Center pass in our neighboring community. And the local neighboring library who also did this pass with us, where they provided a free pass to performances. They literally had businesses and other nonprofits coming up to them being like, wait a minute, will you offer a pass to our place? And so people came out of the woodwork to be like, yes, please offer a pass to our skate park. Please offer a pass to our local business. We would love to give away 25 free Pilates classes. Could we do that with your patrons? And so this, I think, is a model as pass-based library of things that really can grow. And what we're doing is we're keeping our data and we're sharing our data, and we can give you a lot of the models that we use on how we make this pass work if you don't have them. Again, this is shared on the Library of Things mutual aid group. Don't hesitate to ask out and be like, okay, wait a minute, I need some more details. Also, we'll just share the Canva files. For any visual you see here, we try to share the Canva files on Lot Mutual Aid Group. Same with candidates nights. I'll just share the whole script I send to local candidates, and you can adapt it to meet your community. And hopefully you'll do the same. Again, I mentioned how we can book things for specific dates and times. Ann Arbor Library does both. They book things for specific dates and times, and they also have a collection that acts just like books. Here at our library, most items that we lend, most 2,000 of them act just like books, but we'll be launching a date bookable thing for certain items that we would use for certain harvest fests, such as a cider press, a big cider press. That you really only need for an afternoon, but you need it a lot in one period of time. So that is a really great use of a temporally appropriate item. If nothing else, think of all the birthday parties and weddings that you can host from your library and community events. We already have done that at our library just with the treating things like books, but it would be even easier if we had a specific date and time where they could get them. Again, I already mentioned topical based library of things, but I bet a bunch of you already run craft classes. If you run craft classes, you already likely have some tools in your library. So it makes sense, instead of keeping them in a closet, lend them. I can't tell you what a great thing this has been. We've had people start businesses on soap with soap making and making their own reusable bottles out of old wine bottles that they save from recycling. There is so much potential to support entrepreneurship in these as well. Okay, so I've talked about a lot of models, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk step by step about how to cultivate a library of things at your library. I know some of you are just beginning, and some of you are like, yeah, we have it, we got this. So bear with me because I'm trying to hit some of the high points, but I'm probably going to bore some of you, and but we're going to try to. So feel free to chime in with your advice if you've already been through this in the chat. So, how to cultivate a library of things. You can draw inspiration from your library of things in a lot of different places. This electric mixer for earth and plaster, we do a lot of programming based off of climate solutions. And so because of that, I look at Project Drawdown a lot and I think of, oh, if everyone did this, solve problems in this way or used eco paint, this could be a really great thing. So for example, we use an eco paint sprayer at our library of things. We lend an eco paint sprayer. And what it did is it introduced a whole bunch of people to what certain chalk paints are and non-petrochemical paints, milk paints. And it really changed a whole bunch of ways people both use our library, but also how they approached construction projects at their home, which is really exciting to us. Another tool that's my favorite tool back here is this Weston tomato and fruit strainer. You can also just ask our lot mate mutual aid group, what are your favorite tools and why? And we will tell you. Okay. So we can share that data, right? And we can help you choose the best tools that we think work for our region and they might work for yours. That Weston, you can boil whole apples that you've gleaned, and then it automatically turns them into applesauce. With a half hour worth of cranking, you have enough applesauce for 3 years. It's pretty amazing. So this is a picture of what some of our library of things looks like now. It used to all be we started it because we just started it in the stack. So I would weed the cooking section and then I'd have a free shelf and then I'd put library of things items on that shelf. And then we couldn't stop because people loved the library of things items so much. And it made our books go out more. So it was really a win-win. Because you know what? It's really hard to be excited about a waffle book if you don't have a waffle iron. Ends up that can be a problem. So when you're thinking about imagining what library of things you want, remember I'm just talking about a couple models today, but here are some of the speakers we've had from around the world talking about Library of Things on the Library of Things mutual aid group. You can go back and see all those archives on our YouTube channel. So every month for the past 2 to 3 years, we've had a different speaker on a different Library of Things topic. So if you want to geek out with us, that's one way to do it. And you can see pictures from around the globe. So let's talk about acquisition of items. There are a lot of different ways to obtain items. I really love running a donation drive with volunteers. We didn't do that at our library, but I really encourage you to think about doing that because there's a lot of stuff in the world and you can get a lot of this for free. Money is not the primary issue with Library of Things. You can also just add a few items each year that you go and buy as part of your book collection, or you can actually include it in your book budget. I really encourage you to strategize with neighboring libraries so that you don't all buy the same thing. Because sometimes that's not necessary. For example, we have a library 5 minutes down the road, and they're buying an amazing amount of Toonie boxes. I'm sure some of you have heard of Yotos and Toonie players. Well, instead of doing that at our library, we bought Wonder Books and a whole bunch of other things. So now we're specializing in two different items, and our patrons, if they really want to, they can spend $25 on a library card at our neighboring library, and they can win from both collections. And again, that just helps each other, right? We can do more with less. At Curtis, we lend in a lot of items that aren't traditional books, like I said, and we really concentrated on missing literacies. And we didn't start doing this all at once. We've done this over the past 10 years. But now you can see this is what the topics that we tend to focus on. This is all publicly available online, and you can, I think I shared the Canva files even on the Lot Mutual Aid listserv. Um, and so while we have a ton of emergency supplies now, we didn't start by talking about that because we didn't have an emergency supply book section of the library. And all of these sections came from that nonfiction part of the library. We focus on actions that fit our community. So as I said, we have a special way. We're trying to turn sad faces into happy faces by doing sustainability programming, by getting people together and providing them the resources and the space to have those programs. And we're trying to do that with a triple bottom line approach, which is a sustainability approach. And because we did so much programming associated on sustainable goals, our Library of Things then reflected those sustainable goals. So now you can see, and you're welcome to take a look at this on our website, but for every sustainability goal in the world, we have a lot of tools that locals can use to help us take action on those goals. And we keep buying them because people keep wanting to use those tools. So that, as you can see, why we have this kind of collection development policy that is a little different. We have it also written out and it's shared online, but that is why it's so broad now. But you can start with something very specific and targeted. So when you go to display your items, again, you can do everything under the sun, or you can be very specific and targeted. I came from a tool library background, and so for us, putting a bunch of tools in a bucket and having it lent like that wasn't a problem. How many of you think tools in a bucket would go over well at your library? Maybe it would. I've seen it work. However, at my library, no, that wasn't going to cut it. We really pride ourselves on being a welcome, like a space that's very relaxing and very organized when you come into. And the only kind of chaos is plants, in theory. Of course, us humans are a little chaotic too. And so as a result, the aesthetics of how to display things was really important. So we came up with a system where we did keep things in the public. We tried all sorts of things. We hid them away in a closet at first, but then we found they went out so much more if we were able to put them on display. So we came up with a solution, and I've shared all of this online. You can literally download these Canva files of items. We use big plastic see-through bins that you can you put a tag on. We have other things that you can hang, which saves so much space, but you have to buy really expensive metal bars to hang the items on because they get really heavy. We have inexpensive plastic totes that you can buy. Yes, they are plastic. I tried to avoid them, but I had to succumb. I also had to laminate the labels. I tried not to. I was wrong. Again, our team was right. So we share this knowledge so that you don't have to go through the hassle of, wait a minute, why do you do carabiners? Or why did you get that hook versus that? You, with just a simple question to the Library of Things mutual aid group or look at our archives, you can see exactly what people used and why. I, for example, didn't know anything about silicone bands, but rubber bands break all the time. Silicone bands, you buy them once, you're done. You can use them for 10 years and more. So you can see we store items in a variety of ways, but we make them look very similar. Others of my friends, they actually lend things in lockable cabinets and that you can use an app on your phone to open up. Other folks, they have put the items directly next to the books. And so it's like you have little mini library of things displays all over your library. There's a lot of different ways that you can physically display the items. Similarly, there's a lot of different ways you can catalog the items. So I'm happy to go into depth on cataloging, but I think there's a couple of things that I'll just put out there. It's a solvable problem. So whether you have a cataloger who's really excited about it or who's very hesitant about it, we've got solutions for books. It can be as easy as cataloging a book or less arduous. For example, if you are using MARC records like in Koha, you can just add a lot of alternative titles under that 246 version in MARC. But if you don't want to use that method and you just really want all you want for your library of things, you just want people to be able to get the item and you want only, you could just have a book and they could look through pictures of the book and then you could go in the back closet and be like, great, here's the item that you wanted that was called this. And you don't even have to catalog it if you don't want to. You can literally just keep it in a book. That's what we started with. We started with a book. Then we made a WordPress site that was searchable by tags and keyword. Then we actually used our book catalog, which is the Aspen Lida system I'm sure you're using with Koha. That's the discovery layer. We have plenty of examples of other Koha libraries who are using this. And if you're using BibFrame and want to add videos and maintenance plan and use case scenarios and all sorts of oodles of extra into your cataloging, I gotcha. We can talk about it. We're working on it together and you should join the team. Okay, maintenance is another thing that tends to scare folks a little bit. Um, it is not hard to maintain a lot of these items. Some of them, like musical instruments, you do have to replace the strings. I am not, I learned everything on University of YouTube. Okay, so it's a solvable problem. Some libraries have an amazing maintenance plans, and that is actually shared or going to be shared on the Library of Things mutual aid group. Other folks for their insurance that governs their library and their maker space in their library or their public space in their library, they actually have to check certain things each year. Our insurance doesn't require that. Our insurance just, you know, it, they didn't blink twice at this. They said, "Oh, this makes sense. Yeah, you lend books, lend these things too." So it is really varied. You have a lot of people in New York who lend things. So insurance and maintenance should not be an issue for you. I can get you in contact with a lot of people in your neighborhood. In fact, I'm sure there's some on this call who lend items. And that is really not hard to do. Here at my library, we require folks, we ask them how it worked for them when it came in. And our public is really amazing at saying, "Oh, just like that didn't DVD. I think it has a scratch on it." They're like, "Oh, I think this is missing a screw. You might want to do something, or actually, I just bought you this. Would you mind doing, I thought if you want, you can share this." And we're like, "Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Great. Thank you." Because they are grateful for having it. Okay. We're still at that stage where they're like, this is an amazing service, not why aren't you doing this for me? Okay. And that is an experience I think most of us who have Library of Things have. Now, of course, you may have a Library of Things, but it doesn't do you any good if no one knows about it. Some of the best, there's all sorts of different ways to market your Library of Things. My favorite are these little bookmarks you see there. We have them that specialize in all sorts of things. We have ones that specialize in crafting tools and home and garden tools in all of our sections. And then we drop off appropriate bookmarks all around the town and the region. And so, if you have a sports bar, you could drop off your sporting library of things items there. If you have a hardware store, you can drop off your bookmarks for your hardware store there. And people are usually so thrilled. I mean, I haven't been turned down yet of people not wanting to give out those bookmarks. Also, if you keep the library of things out in the open, ends up it advertises itself. So you can see here on the left-hand side, we had remember how I told you we started in our cooking area where we had one shelf and then we had to expand it to another shelf? Well, all of that used to be cooking and entertaining books. But as we weeded some of the older books that were falling apart and we put more tools on it, it was really wonderful because you'd go looking for a cooking book on dumplings and then you'd look across and be like, what is this? What is this? Is that a dumpling maker? What? How is that? And so that really spoke for itself. And then next thing you know, we had people bringing in their visitors from away, and we were being talked about at dinner parties because I got this cool thing at the Library of Things to host this dinner party. And now we have, even odder things, thanks to donations, by often those local businesses and organizations. A lot of our items were actually solicited donations where we asked, hey, would you be willing to donate? And they absolutely said yes. Oh my gosh, that's wonderful for them. So I want to pause here for a second. I could talk about all of these things a lot more, but I've seen a lot of questions come through, so I've decided to leave actually a full half hour to talk questions rather than what I was planning on 15 minutes, but I want to make sure we get all of those nuances answered. So, and we can go back and talk more about this. I have extra slides here, so I can talk more about other things if for some reason I'm wrong and we don't have questions. But I just want to pause and say I've thrown a lot at you. I'm sure some of this is maybe some of you have done this, experienced this, and you should be giving this presentation instead of me. And others of you are like, whoa, you threw a lot at me. Now I don't know what to do. So I want to make sure we pause here and just take a couple of minutes for questions so that I can help answer some of those specific concerns you have.
So we had a couple questions at the top of the program, but before I read them out, I just want to let everyone know that Alex Carver is here, and he was nice enough to join in case anyone has a cataloging question for Koha. So just throwing that out there. But the questions that came up at the beginning, the first one was, how do you deal with missing pieces in games?
Yeah, great question. So in fact, and I have some pictures on this, and I'll show you momentarily. So there's a lot of different strategies that different people use for their libraries, and it kind of depends on what your library's desire is and tolerance is for missing pieces. There's some things if you miss a few pieces, it's not a problem, right? But here, for example, people hate it when you miss pieces of puzzles. So we actually have and again, this is shared on the Library of Things mutual aid group, but we have a thing that we put into every puzzle that says, hey, are there missing pieces? If so, let us know. And we'll donate this puzzle to a worthy cause. And people do. They just let us know. For games, we have games in different sections of the library purposely because of missing pieces. So we have games in the children's section, in the teen section, and in the adult section. And I can show you what that actually looks like here. I think oops, I think on the next slide. Um, the reason we do that is because Peaceable Kingdom games is what you used to only use in the children's section. It's the next one. But in the adult section, because Peaceable Kingdoms games, it was really easy to get replacement pieces if you purchased directly from them. And there are certain, and those tend to be cooperative games, so they were very popular in our library anyway. Other games like Scrabble or Blockus were very popular in, say, the teen section, but we just not all the pieces were kept. And so what we would do is we'd check them when they come in, and we have a picture of it so that you can see exactly what it's supposed to be. But then also we have teen volunteers who go through it every quarter and check all the pieces so that hopefully the people don't get frustrated. We also have it so that every piece is numbered so that if you have an item and oh no, I found this under my couch, we know exactly what game it goes to and where it's missing from. And there's, in fact, if you're into games, so there's a couple of things. On May 1st, Rebecca Nutter, who's the head of the Toy Library Association of America, or actually she just retired as president. She's still on the board, but she's associated with them and she runs the Minneapolis Toy Library. She'll be speaking, and we're going to have a concentrated Library of Things chat just about children's items and games being one of them. Some I know at what they do at her organization, because it can be kind of arduous to label all those items, is she gets volunteers who bring them home, bring an extra game home and do all the labeling for her. So it's actually something that's not difficult. It's just done. There's other libraries who feel differently. They weigh their items. We don't do that. We package them so they're pretty easy to see what the items are that you need and what's missing, so that it really is just a glance by circulation to be like, okay, we got that, and that. Okay, we're good to go. But there's still a possibility that you could be missing like two cards out of the deck, right? That just happens. The other thing is when we get rid of a game, we save the pieces of the old game, so then we have a constant replacement supply. So it's something we can easily fix pretty quickly. Does that answer a little bit of that? As you can see, there's no one right answer, but I have a swath of options on how you can choose to fix that.
Well,
Oh, and I'll
go
say
ahead.
so here on this extra slide, I wanted to show you some pictures. So this orange wall, that is how small our teen library of things is. And you can see that is just, for the most part, board games. And then here you see a pile. They tried to use a hanger, but it didn't work. The teens just prefer the pile. This is a pile of bags, and they're all colored. They're usually orange for teen, or they have orange zippers. And they have all the same tags that you saw in other places, but these ones those are when you have like a drawing kit, and in the drawing kit you have the really fancy markers that are like the Vogue markers of the time. Or in this other kit, they have other consumables that are very. So this is one of the few areas where we have consumables. So these games are kind of managed by the teens. We have games in the adult section that are different. They're much more varied. We have a whole bunch of them. We have everything from chess to multicultural Nigerian Watt to Awara. We have a whole bunch of them, as well as murder mystery games and role-playing games. There's one called, oh shoot. There's one, by Indigenous authors for Indigenous, imagining the world as if colonization hadn't happened, for example, which is interesting, as well as Dungeons and Dragons and all of that. But then down here, where you see this picture on Explorer packs, that is our children's library of things. So these shelves are interesting because they're almost always empty, but not because if we actually got all the games back, they'd almost all be stuffed. They'd be overflowing. We don't actually have enough space for all the things we lend. But you can see here, we have organized them a little differently. We have very clear Explorer packs where they have like 3 books and then a magnifying glass and a scavenger hunt. But then we have more traditional games, like I was talking about, cooperative games or peaceable kingdom games or bingo of birds. And again, they are tied with a silicone band, a carabiner, and the same tag you see everywhere else, but it says children's. And on each of these tags, we have, I can go back to the slide that had it, but we have our borrowing and use policy on every single one, as well as our inventory on every single one. But with games, sometimes we also have a laminated piece of paper where you can see every item that's needed for the game.
The other question that came in earlier was, are there insurance and liability considerations when a library lends out health-related items like blood pressure monitors?
So yes, always. I think there's a lot more concerns that we think through as people who know the public library and the public library patrons than necessarily even other humans are aware of. We we lend blood pressure monitors. We lend a whole bunch of items, and we didn't have to add any. We checked in, we thought about it, and the reality is the people who were borrowing that, um, wanted to use it. So for everything, it's at their own risk. Everything we're trying, just like our pressure cookers or canners, we can't guarantee that they are a master preserver, a master canner, and they know what they're doing, and they're not just trying to put things in a jar and then call it jam, even when it's not. So there is a level of risk, but we think in those cases, providing the health tools and making sure they're working and good to the best of our ability, um, is worth it to help our patrons. There's some things though that we haven't lent, and there's a lot of discussion of that on the Library of Things Mutual Aid listserv. We, for example, some of the things we don't lend, and this is one of the things I wanted to add to talk about, is I like to say like code G, which is gross. So we do try not to lend anything with bodily fluid. So for example, carpet cleaners, if used appropriately, great. Same with shop vacs. If used appropriately, great. But at the same time, how many of you know someone who's had a sewage flood in their basement and maybe tried to clean it up themselves? We don't want to have to deal with that at the public library. There are really great industrial places you can rent some stuff, those things from nearby. And so for us, we thought it wasn't the good use of our space, time, and staff effort. Um, but my friend, the one I told you about who had the disaster library, she lends all those things. And it's really essential for her. We do lend pumps because they're easy to dry. We don't lend any, we don't lend chainsaws, but we do lend chainsaw sharpeners because what's worse than a chainsaw? A non-sharpened chainsaw. And here, chainsaws are pretty ubiquitous. Most people have an electric chainsaw, if not a gas-powered chainsaw. But would I trust every library patron with a chainsaw? No, I would not. We have certain items that you have to be 18 to utilize. Just like we keep all books in the upstairs nonfiction section, or that are kind of meant as the adult collection, just like how we have a kids nonfiction selection and a teen nonfiction selection. But we're not saying that teens can't go up and get the nonfiction books upstairs. That's up to their parents to monitor what they borrow. However, we do have some Library of Things items that we were concerned that if they were not used properly, they could really cause serious harm. So, for example, and that list is publicly available on our website, um, and we add to it as necessary. For example, we do not lend, there's a pump. And if you are a child who might not know that like water and electricity are dangerous, you might plug in the pump and put it in water. I don't know. So we decided anything that had to do with electricity and water, we just didn't want to lend to children. Not to say your parent couldn't come borrow the transfer pump and help you with whatever science project it was you wanted to use that transfer pump for, but we just were concerned about that level of knowledge. Um, Another items we do 18 plus are anything with blades. So one, we try not to lend blades. So if it's a coping saw or a saw, we don't lend it with the blade. You have to go buy your own blade. A jigsaw, the jigsaw blades are $2, right? And you have to get the right one for what you're cutting anyway. But a jigsaw is at least $75. So what we're doing is we're helping people acquire the tool, but then they can go buy the blade at the local hardware store. And yes, we did contact the local hardware store. Anything we lend, hopefully you can get at a local store. Same with a rock tumbler, you can go get the grit at a local store. So, and we refer people to local stores in our Library of Things. So the safety wise, just again, there's some kids, of course, you trust with knives, and that's up to their parents. But we, as a group, we're trying to put in reasonable restrictions based on the health and safety of our patrons, and that's when we felt like, okay, we don't want you riding home on your bike with a saw blade. So, same with a broad fork. It's a big garden instrument. It has very sharp tines on the bottom of it. You really need a car to be able to use it. So we put it as an 18 plus item. I'm sure somewhere there's a lovely 16-year-old gardener who wants to borrow our broad fork, but I'm sure there's an 18-year-old working on the farm with them who could borrow it and use it. Um, so everything is a shade of gray, right? It's not that in your community is going to be different than our community. In Estonia, anyone can borrow a chainsaw from their bus and they'll bring it on, they'll deliver it to you and on their bus in Tallinn because that's just normal. Other places, they can't believe we loan kids' games to children as part of our library of things. So I'm not saying that any of these rules and regulations are perfect for you, but you have options of a lot of different models to choose from. Oh, in some places, insurance will tell you you have to only lend to 18 and above. In some locations. So that's another, again, always check with the insurance that you have at your library. Usually because we're public spaces, we have a lot of insurance already, right? Because anyone can trip and fall on anything. So how about now, why don't we, if there's other questions, please um, ask and put them in chat. And if it's silent, you can tell me why in the sense of, oh, you've answered all my questions, or you lost me 10 slides back, because then it will give me an idea of should I expose you to more things and explain a lot of these pictures, or should I go back and reach and talk about some of these things in more depth?
I think
Remember, there are
it's
no bad questions.
we're an okay size group that if you want to unmute to ask your question, you can do that, or you can put it in the chat.
Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit. Oh, can you send your lending time periods? Great question. Yeah, for us, we lend everything like books. So we get a book for 3 weeks, so you get a tool for 3 weeks. With the exception, we now have a specialty lending period for specialty tools. So for example, the blueberry rake or the broad fork or the canning equipment, if a item has more than 4 holds on it, I reduce it to a 1 week checkout time. So for example, the wood chipper, the power washer, the worm casting bin, these are some of our popular items. The Wi-Fi hotspots, you only get them for 1 week to increase that sharing. Yeah, how do we balance the space? Great question. I mean, I think we listen a lot to our humans. Again, the thing you are seeing, the pictures you've seen, those are after 10 years. We didn't just go make a massive change and not ask anyone about it. We started lending a few craft items, a few cooking items, and a few um, uh, sporting, like outdoor sports items, most of which we had or we needed to run a program with to meet a community need. And people kept giving us, we had feedback forms, and I had hundreds, literally hundreds of people who crossed off the form and said, when I like the library of things, I don't really like the library of things. I'm not going to use this, and I don't think this is what we should invest in. People crossed it out and wrote, I love it. So when you get hundreds, literally hundreds of those feedback forms, you're like, okay, people want this. This is something in our community that they want. I'm not saying that's our valid study, but and so as we listened more and more, and what we did is we gave feedback options on every display. We had, what would you like to see in your library of things? Uh, what about these 5 items? Do any of them pique your interest? So it's almost like we had the community vote on what they wanted. Indeed, there are people who run surveys, and I would encourage you to do this if you're starting a library of things from scratch, to ask people what they want. But I would seed it. I would seed it with your ideas. Because in our case, people had no concept that you could lend a shovel, much less a mushroom inoculation kit. So for us, it was really important to grow this little by little, explain what the tool was, how that tool helped you meet this community need, and create a posse of humans who then wanted to use that tool. So that way, even if your program failed and you didn't get that many people, you'd get a few and they'd still use the tool. So you'd have number of checkouts of the tool, people at the program, and you'd have a lot of metrics on which to gauge your success. So the library of things is outnumbered by books. And unlike books, if we don't use a library of things item in a year, we have to get rid of it. Books, we have to not, if it doesn't go out in 5 years, that's when we consider weeding it. So we are still incredibly biased towards books. However, despite that, we still now have all these library of things. And if we tried to get rid of it now, I can't imagine the reaction. Humans are just really thrilled because there's nowhere you can go rent a mushroom inoculation tool. This is one of my favorite ones, but um, you can't just go get that, or like a grandpa's goodie getter, like this nutcracker tool. But yet, by having those things, you can all of a sudden enable your local folks to, get fresh local food that they could never have because they can't. How many of us can afford a $400 tool, much less many of those $400 tools? And that I find a real sweet spot between $50 and $350 in our community is where there's so many quality tools at that monetary level that we can't own them all. We can't store them all. We can't maintain them all. But if we share them all, we've just made our entire world richer. Whether it's just exploring new cuisines because we all like to eat. And now you can use the tortilla press. You can use the this, or whether it's because you didn't want to own the 7 different types of plumbing tools you needed for the one time you needed to fix the leaky faucet. So that's where, so I think the tools that we do lend, like the plumbing tools and more specialty tools or drywall tools, we tend to we didn't just grab those at first, right? Those we taught a program on. We taught adapting your house to can live in it as you get older, and like simple tools simple fixes you can do might want to do yourself, and things you definitely don't want to do yourself. We had a plumber come in and teach that. And we recorded that so that even if you come check out a tool today, you can still talk to this amazing local plumber who's retired and helps Habitat for Humanity volunteers. And she'll be like, if it deals with sewage, you don't want to do it. That's when you give us a call. But if it's fixing your faucet leak, let me show you how to use this quirky tool from the local library, and you can do this yourself, you know? So that's a lot more trustworthy than just a random YouTube video. And then we have that link to in the collection, and then we share it with all of you. And if we imagine if we all did that, what a resource we would have.
There's a question in the chat that says, could you talk a little bit about fines, charges for missing items? So an item goes out with a charger but doesn't come back with the USB-C wire or the charging brick, etc., or charges for items that come in late.
Yeah, happy to do that. So everyone does this a little differently. Our library, we're a fine-free library, but we are not a bill-free library. So if you don't bring the item back, you get billed for it. And uh, you pay the full cost of the item. So if you bring out the dehydrator and you don't bring it back, you get $350 is what you owe. So you just can't use the library. Our threshold is $15. You can't use the library if you owe more than $15. So a single billed item from the library of things is not going to let you lose the library. We don't have a problem with theft, knock on wood, or not returning things for the most part. Every once in a while it happens. But we have also had what we thought have happened, and then people miss the library so much, 2 years later, they return the item so that they can get their library card back. And so that's like the rare occasions it has happened. It then got fixed. Um, with there are items that people can bring in, and I know a lot of people worry about cleanliness of items. So some other libraries have cleaning fees so that if it's not clean enough, you'll get charged a fine for it. We do not do that. We do not accept items if they're dirty. We just don't. So we look at them and like, oh, try again. We can't accept that. We gotta have you wipe it off a little bit and do this and explain it. Um, and or you can just pay for the item. And it ends up rather than paying for the full cost of any item, they would rather clean the item. Truthfully, it's been an issue like 3 times, and each time I felt really bad for the humans because it was one of the things we're like, oh my gosh, I thought the teenagers cleaned that after their thing. I'm so embarrassed. And we're like, it's okay. We're not judging you. We've all forgotten to clean a waffle maker in our lives. This is okay. So it was more of a conversation. All of these things, we're not looking to put pressure on anyone, but we have a conversation with someone, and it's usually someone at my level, a librarian who says, okay, let's talk about this. So you took the picnic table to a concert. How was the concert? Was it great? Yeah. But then you weren't able to bring it back. And they were like, it flew away. The winds were so big in northern Maine. It's somewhere in the woods. And I was like, ooh, okay. Littering, not good. Like, we'll talk about that. I'm going to give you some resources on this. But also, what do you feel like you should do about this missing item? And they'll just admit, they're like, I think I should donate it. I should pay the money. But we're also like not going to take money from someone if they don't return the item because their house burned down in a local fire. We'll help solve that problem. They've got other seaweed to saute. So it's really much more about reminding people constantly that we're all in this community together and that we have enough items now so that we can say, if we share, we get more. And there's no way anyone's going to disagree with that. It's really inspired a lot of culture change where sometimes people will bring in an item for the share cart or the free cart. And especially teenagers and kids, they'll run up to me and be like, "Can you put this in the library of things so we all can use it? This is a great tool." Right? Versus someone else might just want to take it, but no, it's happened multiple times where people are like, "Put it in the library of things," which is really exciting. So because fines we don't do, late fees we don't do, returns it usually happens just fine. Billed items, people do get billed for items a lot because they forget they have it and then they return it. So that does happen. We don't lend to other libraries our library of things items because we don't do interlibrary loan, but we have had other libraries and other community organizations buy library cards in order to use our library of things. Because if for $75 you can get a library card at your local library and check out all those items, if any of you have ever rented a tool, that's like not even a day's worth of tool rental. So even if you just think about it from a cost perspective, it makes a lot of sense to, think about getting a library card. I think I answered some of that.
Uh, while folks are thinking of more questions, I just want to put in a plug that at RCLS, we loan items for all of you. So they are items that you can use for your programs. They are not to then loan to your patrons, but to keep in-house. We do have a list of them on our website, but it's things like a foam cannon. So if you want to have a foam party at your library, you can borrow the foam cannon. We have a Cricut and an iron press for the Cricut. We have a button machine. We have um, lots of AccuCuts. We have Ozobots for STEM programs. We have a buzzer if you're doing a trivia program. So do keep in mind that we also have library things for all of you.
Which is just awesome, right? That's how the sharing ecosystem should work. Rather than us keeping some of those things we need once a year at our library, why don't we share it with the neighboring library? We do that informally because we're a much smaller system than y'all. Oh, we didn't catalog it, but that is amazing that you have that resource. So while I'm waiting for more questions, I'm just going to go through and call out a couple of these pictures because they all explain something. So the one you see with the popcorn popper, it's actually right next to a community kitchen sheet. So we were getting all of these tools to help deal with food literacy and food needs. And we did that in multiple ways, but that now we're able to point to other resources in our community, like this sheet where you can go to a community kitchen and you can get the next level tool. So we might have an immersion blender, but they have the big immersion blender. We might have a food dehydrator, but they have a harvest right, um, uh, not dehydrator, a freeze dryer. And you can use that for very little to no money. And the reason we were able to do that is because of a huge community partnership. And that grew up alongside of the Library of Things with this as part of the goal. And the same thing is you might start out using our music kits. You can see how I didn't clean for you this. This is like the messy version. But in our music kits, you can see how some things are hanging, some things are on shelves. And it's always messy because someone's always looking through it. So we have volunteer jugers who come by every twice a week to clean it up so that we don't have to spend the time doing it to make it look pretty. But the cool thing is so many people have been using it that we need that level of help. And that is pointing people to how to get free instruments. So that if you start here and you really want to go on with guitar lessons, we can get you access to help. And it's the same in every section. We point you to other resources. That hard hat, the tag's hidden on the inside, and I took out any of the foam that could have lice in it. And we have a UV light so we can sanitize it. But that is because to go to a local transfer station, you have to have a hard hat. And so people don't usually go to it because most of them don't own hard hats. So that enables a whole new level of recycling that most of our community couldn't use. without it. That tarp plan, how many of these do you see at like yard sales all over? Well, that silicone band that I was talking about, that is how we catalog things like that. Other things, we actually like baking sheets, you can actually still hang them. And so you can put a clip on them and then hang them. So everything's formatted a little differently. Both so that you can display it, but then you can turn it to the side and store it. So this Carbon City Zero, that has a silicone band and a carabiner and a tag so that you can store it sideways and you don't have to move everything around. So you can fit a lot in, but you can also display it as is so that people can actually see it when you have more display space. And then we actually have an oversized section in our basement. So the tech and more cart with the lacrosse sticks and things, that is just a view into these. We can bring them up on nice days so people can see what's in the oversized bins. And it's really a great storage method. It's just a baker's rack with a zip tied pegboard on the back. You can hang anything on these things. This is a really messy version of it. I can give you a much cleaner one, but there's a tag for where every item goes with a picture of the exact item so that it's really not arduous for staff to be able to know exactly. It says on the tag in letters, but it also shows then where it goes. It says home and garden cart 3, shelf 2, or hanging. And so you know exactly where it goes or where exactly to go get it when it's an oversized item. We also have this is our cataloging station. It's right outside my cubicle. It's nothing fancy, but there's little signs that say catalog me, cataloging supplies. I need a new tag. It's really that basic. If I can do it, y'all can do it, okay? This is not uh, this is not anything fancy. And then these are the storage right next to the cataloging station where we keep all these extra bins when we're ramping up to do a new section. Right now we're doing local climate solution steam kits, so that's what they're all prepped for. Then on the other side of my cubicle, I have this little cart that is a repair cart. So, which is down in the bottom left here. That is what our repair cart looks like. It has a broken sewing machine on it. It has 2 things that need strings likely, and I haven't gotten to it yet. The xylophone someone broke the case on, and that has a whole bunch of cleaning supplies. And someone chipped the kindling cracker, which is another great tool. If any of you have anyone who uses wood, you can take these little bits of wood and you whop it with you put the wood in the kindling cracker, and there's a blade facing up and you whop it with a heavy hammer and it splits the kindling. And it does so in a much safer way than using an axe. Um, so again, we could talk a lot about specialty tools and some of our favorite tools. And I highly encourage you, if nothing else, if you're thinking about a library of things, just getting on the Lot Mutual Aid listserv to ask people about tools because they will save you so much time and effort on getting the right ones. Learn from our mistakes. Ergonomic tools are a really big hit too. We have a lot of specialty repair tools, specialty ergonomic tools. We don't all need to own a glasses repair case. We can share, and that's just been one of a wonderful thing to have.
I just want to give everyone another chance to either put your questions in the chat or again, feel free to unmute to ask any questions.
I was going to say I can keep going. To remind me, what's our time now? My clock just went off. How much time do I still have?
We have about 3 minutes left.
Okay, cool.
Grand
I was like,
finale.
if you told me half an hour, I was like, don't get me wrong, I can still go. But it's always hard to fit, decades worth of knowledge into a single presentation. And it can be really overwhelming for all of you who are like, I just heard about it. I wanted to think about starting it, and now I know way too much. Don't let this scare you. I promise you can, what we do and the way I help people start library things here locally is literally I wait in my cubicle until I get about 10 really prime items donated. Like right now, there's a cart waiting to go out. It has a acoustic guitar, an electric guitar, a crock pot, a couple board games, a couple puzzles, a shovel, a pasta maker, some levels, a toolbox, a couple other things I can't think of. So I wait until that pile in my cubicle. Oh, an apple grinder until it gets annoyingly high. Oh, and a blender. So, and that level of annoying is about that many items, which if you were to buy them all at once, you're like, ooh, that's a pretty penny. But when the community donates them to us, I can now call up another library in my area and say, hey, you told me you wanted to start a library of things. Would you like this pile of items? And they usually squeal with delight and come down from their one-room library in a car. And because that's what I grew up with was a one-room library. Okay. So I know what that's like. And they come in and they grab all these items. And I say, okay, here's the deal. Remember, we can help you. You can copy all of our stuff. You can copy the Canva things. And some of them just start out with a book and they put it on a display shelf. Or one of them had a little, their local, like little free library. They actually turned into a little free library of things based on community. They put up one next to it and they started it and then their community has responded in different ways. For some people they had to build a shed to make more things. For other people they actually their town voted to give them more funding to do a couple of things. And for other people they're like, this might not be the right fit, we might try again later with yard tools or specialty event items. And any of those paths forward are totally okay. There's no obligation to do anything, but sometimes a library of things can help you meet your goals. And I hope that you're not strangers and that if this could help you, and that hopefully this helped you a little bit, because that's the goal. And I look forward to learning from all of you.
Thank you so much, Hazel. Um, just one last quick plug for everyone. Of course, definitely check out the resources that Hazel just shared. If you're interested in sharing Library of Things ideas, questions within the system, we do have a sustainability listserv if you're not already on it. And also, there are the new county-wide listservs. So that would be a nice place if you're uh, looking to collaborate with the other libraries in your county to say, hey, we're adding this item to our library of things. Does anyone want to share this other item? So I will put the link with our distribution list information should anyone want to join those groups. Um, and once again, thank you, Hazel, and thank you to all of you for joining us on a Monday morning, which is always the best for learning. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day.
Thank you all so very much. And whatever you do, thank you for all that you've already done in public library service or library service and just being good humans. We're all in this community together. So don't be strangers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.